Picture this.
Nights are clear and cold and the bugs are all gone. And if you're lucky, you get to experience the first winter snowfall.
One man, alone in the wilderness, stomach growling, boots falling apart, camera balanced on a rock that absolutely does not want to be a tripod. He stares straight into the lens and calmly explains how to survive with nothing but grit, bushcraft wisdom, and the spiritual confidence of someone who absolutely believes this is real television.
I have no idea what time it is, although I'm sure it's close to morning already. And I'm exhausted.
This wasn't just a show, this was a promise. This was Survivorman, the anti-reality reality show. No crew, no hotel, no producer whispering lines from behind a tree. Just Les Stroud, freezing, starving, and very politely refusing to turn suffering into a circus trick. At least that's how it was sold. And for a long time, we believed it. We wanted to believe it.
That's close to some water. That sounds like a shelter location to me.
In a media landscape full of fake danger, scripted peril, and survival shows that somehow involve room service, Survivorman positioned itself as the last honest man standing. While everyone else was surviving, Les was allegedly just out there, surviving harder. But here's the thing about selling authenticity as your entire brand. The moment even a single crack appears, the whole illusion starts leaking faster than a duct-taped water bottle in the desert.
Do I have any experience with strange sounds or, quote unquote, Bigfoot?
Because when your show isn't just entertainment, but a moral flex, every compromise stops being a detail and starts being a betrayal. So what happens when the most real survival show on television slowly becomes entangled in permits, safety nets, internet detectives, and somehow Bigfoot? At what point does authentic quietly become carefully framed? And when did the guy who mocked fake survival TV become part of the same conversation? Survivorman didn't appear out of nowhere.
Little pieces here.
It crawled out of the early 2000s media ecosystem, a time when television was obsessed with extremes, but still pretending it had a soul. Reality TV was booming, but it was also getting sloppy. Everything was louder, faker, shinier, and suspiciously well lit for something that was supposedly happening in the wilderness. And right into that moment stepped Les Stroud, a guy who looked like he'd just wandered out of a bushcraft forum and accidentally reinvented an entire genre. The concept was deceptively simple.
Use that as a blow dart, or taking the straps off of my underwear and using that to make a Hawaiian spear for fishing in Costa Rica.
One man, real locations, minimal gear, no camera crew hovering just out of frame. Les would film himself, carry his own equipment, and survive for a set period of time in environments that ranged from deeply uncomfortable to actively hostile. This wasn't about stunts, it wasn't about bravado. It was pitched as education through suffering.
What'll I have to do?
Tripod and a video camera. And then lastly,
Survival, but stripped of the performance. The show grew out of earlier experiments, most notably Stranded, which tested whether audiences would actually watch someone struggle without constant manufactured drama. They did. More importantly, they trusted it. When Survivorman formally launched in the mid-2000s on Canada's Outdoor Life Network, OLN,
Oh, say goodbye to a good harmonica.
when I'm out there,
and later internationally on Discovery Channel, it hit a cultural nerve. Because this wasn't just a show, it was a rebuttal. While other survival programs leaned into spectacle, Survivorman leaned into restraint. While competitors chased danger for ratings, this one framed endurance as discipline. Even the production companies behind it, including Cream Productions, marketed the format as a kind of moral correction to reality TV excess. And it worked. Survivorman didn't just succeed, it became a benchmark. Fans didn't merely watch it, they used it as a measuring stick. Other shows weren't judged on entertainment value anymore, but on how close they came to being as real as Survivorman. That reputation, earned through timing, tone, and a carefully cultivated sense of authenticity.
if I put this like this, and I can get the animal to go down into this tube,
is what elevated the show from another cable experiment into a cultural reference point. And as we're about to see, that reputation is also what made every future decision exponentially more dangerous. For a while, Survivorman existed in a kind of protected bubble. It wasn't just popular.
I went back to my old survival site and I grabbed the water still. It can make me up to a pint a day.
fire underneath.
It was respected. In internet arguments, it became the nuclear option. Anytime another survival show was accused of fakery, staging, or straight up camping with better branding, someone would inevitably drop the same line. Yeah, but have you seen Survivorman? That was the standard. That was the bar.
Oh yeah, baby.
And that's exactly why the cracks, when they started to appear, mattered so much. The first thing to understand is that Survivorman never claimed to be suicidal television. Despite the branding, despite the lonely shots and the suffering monologues, the show was never produced without a safety net.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that.
Almost set the truck on fire, mind you.
And to be fair, it never really hid that fact either. There was always a support team somewhere out there, sometimes kilometers away, sometimes reachable by radio or satellite phone, sometimes not. This wasn't fraud, it was logistics. Television still has lawyers, insurance still exists, and no network is going to gamble an entire franchise on the hope that their host doesn't slip off a cliff. But here's the problem. Survivorman didn't sell safety, it sold isolation. And once fans started paying attention, the difference between those two things—
I need to make a little pile. Burning meat. Whoa!
became uncomfortably important. The first real documentable dent in the armor arrived in 2007, not through a dramatic expose, but through paperwork. During filming in Alaska's Kenai Fjords National Park, Les Stroud was cited by the National Park Service for conducting commercial filming without the proper permit. The fine wasn't massive, roughly a few $1,000s, no scandal headlines, no outrage monologues, but the implications lingered. Commercial filming, support crew nearby.
Sanitizer and a spark. We've got fire. Cloth that I charred?
Official acknowledgement that this wasn't just one man in the void. On its own, this would have been nothing, a footnote. But Survivorman didn't exist in a vacuum. By this point, the survival TV genre had exploded, and with it came comparison. Most notably with Man vs. Wild, a show that became infamous for blurring the line between survival education and cinematic fantasy. And here's where things got messy. Survivorman's reputation was built not just on what it was, but on what it wasn't. It was the anti-Man vs. Wild, the honest one, the corrective lens. So when people began questioning Survivorman, it felt less like criticism and more like heresy. The real turning point didn't come from journalists or networks, it came from fans. Specifically, from the kind of fans who own topographic maps, zoom in on satellite imagery.
Light there, and it's just coming back onto the grass. It's working.
And treat Google Earth like a courtroom exhibit. Around 2014, detailed analyses of a Utah episode, often referred to as the Canyonlands controversy, started circulating online. Blog posts and forum threads meticulously broke down distances, terrain, and locations, roads that seemed too close, timeframes that felt too convenient, shots framed to suggest isolation where proximity told a different story. And suddenly, Survivorman wasn't just being watched, it was being audited. The argument wasn't that Les Stroud didn't survive. It wasn't that the skills were fake. The argument was subtler and more dangerous, that the story of survival was being massaged, that isolation was being exaggerated, that what felt like impossibility on screen might, in reality, have been a carefully curated challenge rather than an existential ordeal. Les Stroud did respond, not with a press tour or a denial campaign, but through scattered comments and a Facebook response that made its way through the same online communities fueling the criticism. He explained that yes, sometimes locations were closer to roads than viewers assumed. Yes, sometimes transport between locations occurred, with strict rules about not accessing food or water. And no, he didn't believe this undermined the legitimacy of the survival itself. And here's where the situation became complicated, because he wasn't obviously lying. The explanations were plausible, reasonable even.
It was a jaguar. I watched him for a while. He watched me. I yelled. I used my whistle.
But Survivorman had built its legacy on not needing explanations. The moment fans felt like they had to litigate authenticity, something fundamental had shifted. Then came the curveball. In 2015, Survivorman took a hard left turn into something no one saw coming: Bigfoot. What was framed as a skeptical investigation into the Sasquatch phenomenon ended up becoming a full-season pivot. Survival took a backseat to cryptid. The man who once mocked staged danger was now wandering the forest with night vision cameras, audio recorders, and people whose credibility came with footnotes and asterisks. Figures like Todd Standing, already controversial in cryptozoology circles, became part of the wider conversation surrounding the show. For many longtime fans, this felt like genre betrayal. Survivorman wasn't supposed to be about mystery.
I'm listening to something very large. Growl and moan and groan. Not too far from him.
It was about reality. however harsh and boring that reality might be. Bigfoot shifted the discourse from "can you survive" to "do you believe?" And belief is a dangerous currency when your brand is built on trust. Memes followed, Reddit threads spiraled, YouTube videos questioned everything from camera placement to narrative intent. Not with outrage, but with disappointment. The tone wasn't "this is fake," it was "this isn't what you promised." Behind the scenes, the strain was real too. Les Stroud spoke openly about the physical toll, the injuries, the exhaustion. A serious car accident during filming in Mongolia underscored the fragility of a format where the host wasn't just the star, but the entire production infrastructure. When he stopped, everything stopped. When he got hurt, the show didn't just pause, it vanished. By this point, Survivorman hadn't imploded. It hadn't been canceled in disgrace.
The situation. In the morning, the call will go out, and the searchers will all meet at the base camp.
Instead, it entered a quieter, more uncomfortable phase. Specials instead of seasons, spin-offs instead of mainline returns, streaming availability instead of cultural relevance. The show didn't crash, it eroded. And maybe that's the most fitting end for a series built on endurance. No explosion, no scandal montage, just the slow realization that authenticity, once monetized, is always on borrowed time. What ultimately broke Survivorman wasn't a single scandal, a cancellation, or a dramatic downfall. It was something far less cinematic and far more damaging: structural contradiction. The show built its entire identity on being the exception, the one format that didn't lie, exaggerate, or cheat the premise. And that meant it had nowhere to hide once reality caught up with the marketing. The core problem is that Survivorman was never scalable. The one-man, self-filmed, real survival model works exactly as long as the man can keep doing it. There's no rotating cast, no easy replacement, no way to industrialize the suffering. When Les Stroud needed a break, the show needed a break. When his body started pushing back, the format didn't adapt, it fractured. That's not a creative failure. It's a design flaw baked into the premise. Then there's the authenticity trap. Survivorman trained its audience to be hyper-literate in spotting fakery. It encouraged skepticism toward other shows, positioned itself as the yardstick for truth, and cultivated fans who cared deeply about details. Distances, locations, time frames.
Looking for is Les Stroud. He doesn't know the area.
It would be within a mile.
It's a white male adult.
So when online communities started scrutinizing Survivorman itself, the show had already taught them how to do it. The Utah controversy didn't explode because it was uniquely damning, but because it violated an unspoken contract that this show wouldn't need narrative shortcuts. Once that trust eroded, every clarification sounded like a defense. Every explanation felt like backpedaling. Not because they were outrageous lies, but because Survivorman had promised not just honesty, but effortlessness. It was supposed to be real without qualifiers. The Bigfoot pivot only magnified this problem. Even if framed skeptically, cryptid hunting exists in a completely different epistemological universe than survival education. Survival is practical, testable, repeatable. Bigfoot is belief adjacent. Once Survivorman stepped into that territory, it blurred the line between documenting reality and entertaining speculation. For a show that made its name by mocking gimmicks, this was brand self-sabotage.
Eyes are hazel.
In today's media landscape, Survivorman survives mostly as an archive. Clips circulate, old episodes stream, fans revisit the early seasons with a kind of affectionate skepticism. The show didn't become irrelevant because it was exposed as fake, but because its central promise became too fragile to sustain in the age of social media forensics and endless replay. Survivorman didn't fail because it lied. It failed because it claimed it never would. Survivorman didn't collapse in flames. There was no scandal montage, no final humiliating cancellation, no viral clip that single-handedly killed the brand. Instead, it faded the way myths usually do, slowly, awkwardly, and with just enough dignity left that people argue about whether it even failed at all. And maybe that's the most honest ending possible, because for a while, the fantasy did work. The idea that one guy could walk into the wilderness, turn on a camera, and show us something real in an industry addicted to illusion felt revolutionary. Survivorman wasn't just television, it was a coping mechanism for viewers tired of being lied to politely.
Okay, here they come again. Oh, there he is. This should be a good angle.
It told us that authenticity still existed, that effort mattered, that suffering couldn't be faked forever. But authenticity isn't a static achievement, it's a maintenance job. And once it becomes a brand, it stops being a virtue and starts being a liability. Every permit, every safety protocol, every narrative choice becomes suspicious. Not because they're wrong, but because the audience was promised purity. No asterisks, no footnotes, just truth, raw and unfiltered. Survivorman didn't betray its audience so much as it outgrew the conditions that made it believable. Social media turned viewers into investigators. Streaming turned moments into permanent exhibits. And a format built on trust was suddenly expected to survive cross-examination. So what does this say about entertainment now? Maybe that we don't actually want reality. Maybe we want the feeling of reality.
I just don't want to end up at a cliff somewhere.
Carefully packaged, endlessly defensible, and emotionally convenient. Or maybe we just enjoy watching ideals collapse under their own weight. Either way, Survivorman stands as a rare case of a show that almost escaped the machine. Almost. Like, subscribe and let us know which authentic TV concept should be put out of its misery next.